Welcome to the latest episode of CarePoints. I'm your host, Kenny Schiff, Chief Marketing Officer for Lone Star Communications, the Alero Solutions Group, and our latest family member, Promobix. Today's episode is part of my continuing series of conversations with my collaborators at Lone Star, customers, partners, and notable folks in the tech industry. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to another great conversation with my guest. My beat is typically hospital tech and its intersection with clinicians, hospital leadership, and technology. But today's episode diverges a little as I look to celebrate a special milestone in Lone Star Communications' 34-year journey as a trusted partner to hospitals and schools in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and beyond. Effective this spring, Lone Star employees now own 30% of the company through the establishment of an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. The employee owners of Lone Star are the foundation of our exceptional partnerships with customers and technology providers. And in a time of mega mergers and acquisitions, Lone Star is doubling down on controlling and building off of its legacy. And who better to invest in than its employees? Today's episode, I asked Ray Bailey, Lone Star's founder and CEO, to talk about his incredible journey and to share his hopes and dreams as Lone Star begins its next chapter. Please enjoy our conversation. Hey, Ray.
Hey,
It's been
Kenny.
a while.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Lone Star. We're going to talk about the things that may have happened before you got to Lone Star that led you to forming Lone Star. We're going to talk about your evolving thinking about the business and the employees and ownership and all that. And we'll lead up to really talking about the employee stock ownership plan, which is kind of an important new milestone in Lone Star's history. So
Right.
Let's go back to 1991. So Lone Star opened its doors in 1991.
Right.
You're starting the company. What was the spark? What did you see or feel that made you take the step to start this new business?
Well, Kenny, it goes back way before that. I mean, I actually had been in the business as a distributor for a while. I was in the business for about 3 years, and then ended up going to work for Rauland. And so I worked for Rauland as a district manager for about 5 years. And in that 5 years, while I worked there, prior to me going to work there, I told him, I says that I really wanted to go to the lower 48 and start my own business because I was in Alaska at the time, and they said, well, if you give us 5 years with Rauland, we'll find the right place for you. So when that 5 years came rolling around, we started looking at different places, and of course Baltimore was an option, and Denver was an option, and any place in Florida was an option. But I really wasn't interested in that. And then when Texas came up as an option, of course, I'd been here in the Air Force in basic training, so I jumped on that, and that became the place where I was going to start the business. Now, I'll back up a little further and say during that 5 years that I worked for Rauland, I really spent that 5 years studying Rauland distributors and how they were successful. And I talked to each one of them about what made them successful and what they did and what they didn't do. And I learned from that, even before all the business books, that it's as important to know what you're going to do or not going to do, what you're specifically not going to enter into, what business you're not going to do. And so I wrote a business plan, and that was the start of everything in 1991.
I've known you a long time, and even when I had not been an entrepreneur myself, I always knew you as a very intentional business person, that you thought a lot about this before you ever opened the door. And I think that really colored how you've run the business since, right?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. And like I say, I really used that 5 years as my MBA, if you will, to study these businesses and specifically study businesses in our industry. And it was specifically Rauland distributors, specifically, what made them successful. And so I took notes for 5 years, and that's what I used to write this business plan and start this business with. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to accomplish when we moved to Texas.
So, in terms of knowing exactly what you wanted to do, I have to imagine that you had a picture of what success was going to look like back then. So, what was success going to look like, from your business plan perspective?
Well, that's a really good question. I will tell you, I called on 20 distributors when I worked for Rauland, and there was different forms of success. There was the little market guys, and there was the big market guys. I had two Chicago companies and a Detroit company, and then I had a company in Toledo, and Toledo, interestingly enough, was really one of the ones that inspired my ESOP. Goals, or I guess it's where I first learned about ESOPs, and I just admired what they did there and how it got employees involved in the company and how they were all working for a common goal. And so that dates back, by the way, to 1987. That was the first time I called on that company, and so when I started Lone Star, I actually started them with the end in mind. I knew where I wanted to go, and I knew I wanted to be an ESOP-owned company. And somewhere along the way in that 34 years, you get caught off, pulled off sides. You see the companies selling to different entities and so forth, and you think, well, maybe that's what I ought to do. But really, we stayed true to the idea of an ESOP in the end.
So, 34 years, you had an idea of, I don't want to say the end, but you had an idea of what's success. So, has that definition changed at all? What does it mean now? How have you built on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So in 1991, when I started the business, a big company in the Rauland sphere, I guess you could say, was about a $5 million top line business. And so, they pretty much did just the Rauland things in schools or hospitals and things like that. And that's pretty much where we've stayed, is true in that schools and hospitals business. But I will tell you, we were fortunate enough to get into a market in Dallas-Fort Worth that was growing. So there was 3.8 million people by the 1990 census, and the 2020 census showed it a little over 8 million. So that's the kind of growth that we had. And where you have that many people come doubling in size, you need two things. You need schools and hospitals. So it was a perfect environment for us. And so the top line business, even though my initial goal was in 5 years to try and get to I think my goal was $4.8 million, just under $5 million. We achieved that, by the way. But then as you look down the road 34 years, a little bit of inflation involved, but we've become such a bigger business, and we've got such I love using Top Gun quotes, a target-rich environment, and with schools and hospitals that we've been able to grow to a company that now employs 285 employees.
So Lone Star was always good at what it did. And from an execution standpoint, clearly you meeting your 5-year goals and exponentially beyond that. But I have to imagine it wasn't just all about pure hardcore execution, that values were involved. And your values as a leader really are imprinted on the business from day one and exponentially evolved from there. So tell us about your values and how that really made it more than just a top line growth situation. You're building something bigger here.
Yeah, the result of being able to study these businesses, 20 some odd Rauland distributors over the 5 years, gave me an opportunity to really fine tune what I wanted to accomplish. And I realized early on that I wanted to be a business that was a high quality business that was very successful at customer service, provided the best customer service, provided a quality installation. And when you go back to 1991 in this business, there is no standard. So here we were trying to create a standard within an unstandardized business. So I took a little bit from the telephone industry, telephony, and I took a little bit from the growing computer industry, and we standardized using their standards and created a standard that we've kept through 34 years in business. We created a standard, and it caused me to write a business plan, or I'm sorry, it caused me to write a mission statement early on that still holds true today. We reflect on it, every time we have a meeting, is it still appropriate for what we do? And it is. And that is, the company will provide the right product the first time, every time, no exceptions. And that's really what it comes down to, is providing the right product for the customer, making sure we have exceptional customer service. And then the other thing you learn over 34 years is that the way you treat employees is a reflection of how you're going to treat your customers, and vice versa. So as we treated customers very well and with good customer service and so forth, it was natural for us to treat the employees the same way. And I really wanted to have an environment where people could come and make a career here within Lone Star. And from day one, I really looked at people that could be here a long time. And we're fortunate enough to have 5 people that had either retired or still with the company that were here within the first 3 years of the company starting.
So it's a reciprocal thing, though. So you intended to keep employees engaged, well compensated, good benefits, et cetera. But you learned and took a lot from those employees, which kind of added to this healthy company that we are sitting here in 2025. So what have employees taught you about leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. My leadership style is one of to empower, to give direction, to show people the vision of where we want to go and what we want to accomplish, and then empower them to get that accomplished, whatever it takes. And that has proved to be the one thing I think that has caused Lone Star to excel in this industry, and that is and grow and maintain employees and have the high rate of employee tenure that we have is I've learned from them that they don't want to be micromanaged. They want to create and build and lead themselves, and so I put them in a position to be able to do that.
And I think I'm about to be 3 years at Lone Star. The tool you've also created a framework where the tools are in place, either from a business management standpoint or from a supporting technology standpoint, so that people can participate in the business in a way that makes them feel like they could be owners, because they are able to impact the well-being of customers, their peers, etc. So, one thing that you said previously about the standard, Lone Star is an ISO 9001 company, which is kind of unusual for people in the industry. Tell us a little bit about that. So clearly, has been a significant investment, which has led to other quality initiatives. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so ISO 9000 was something that while I was at Rauland, they started to pursue, and it was something that I found very interesting, because it created a lot of organization, and it created a lot of internal processes and checks and balances internally that helped make the business better. It was probably not, I think we were in business 6 or 7 years before one of our other manufacturers came up with the idea that they wanted to see companies become ISO certified. So they put together a program for it. In fact, that was EST, Edward Systems Technology. And they put together a program for it to be able to help companies do it. I will tell you, there's one of 2 companies in the United States that became ISO certified under that program, and Lone Star is one of them. Unfortunately, it was a failure for the manufacturer. They spent a lot of money on it. They had a lot of really good ideas with it, but it was just, it's a very hard level of quality to achieve. You got to change a lot of processes internally, and it's very difficult for a company to make that transition into an ISO company. And we were kind of already going that direction because we had our quality initiatives already set. We already knew that customer service was key. We already had a good set of processes behind us. So for us to adapt to that was a lot easier than a lot of companies. And so, like I say, we were one of 2 companies in the United States that were certified up until about 7 or 8 years ago. And then Ronco, which is one of our SD6 partners, SWC, those 2 also became ISO certified.
Well, it requires a level of discipline and ongoing sustained commitment that's tough for smaller businesses. But, if you think about the foundational elements that have allowed the business to really grow almost 20-fold in the time, you have to imagine that it is a success criteria. So the highly intentional planned growth, the investment in the necessary underpinnings of all that have really helped the company continue to what its initial mission is, but really to consider other missions as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's shift to talking about ESOP, right? So ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. So this is a bold move. Now, even though you were visionary early on, had been exposed to it, not a lot of companies do this. I was part of an entrepreneurs group for many, many years, and entrepreneurs can often be pretty tight about having other people participate. So you made a bold move to transition Lone Star in 2025 to being formally an ESOP. Why now?
A lot of my peers have either retired or sold their companies and moved on to other things. And and when I say peers, I'm talking specifically about the SD6 group. And the SD6 group is a group of companies that got together in 2007. Our first meeting was really in 2008, but we put the concept together in 2007 for a group of companies to share best practices and to share, as the technology was changing in the nurse called world and in Rauland's world, and things became network connected and IP programmed. We needed to establish some standards that we could all work within to install those systems and make their installations consistent. So we started this group called SD6. That group of peers, by the way, is one of the reasons for our success, is we've shared those processes for 15 plus years. And when one of us makes a change, we share it with each other, and the other companies can gain value from it. But those guys became very good friends of mine, as well as business peers. And as they have retired, I've watched them. Some of them have sold off to private equity firms. Some of them sold off to private businesses. Some of them have gone public or joined companies that were public. And every one of them has changed. And the thing that I really didn't want to have happen was to see Lone Star change and to see its upper level of management that built this business leave the company and go off and do other things. Now, for some of those folks, it's created opportunities. They started their own businesses and so forth. But for the company itself, it is only a shell of what it once was. And Lone Star has had a lot of success, has a lot of good customers, has built a career for a number of employees, and I just wanted all of that to stay in place as long as possible. By using the same people that helped build the business to run the business into the future, assures that. And an ESOP puts us in that position to be able to do that.
And it creates a cascading situation where the next generation and the next generation can build off of the values, the quality programs, just all the great customer base, all that,
Right.
and also be able to benefit from it beyond just getting a paycheck.
Absolutely. It puts them in a position, and you've heard all the stats. Almost anybody that's a part of an ESOP for any period of time will have twice as much at retirement as they would have had if they didn't have an ESOP, which is the standard 401k and Social Security and that kind of thing. To put an ESOP in there, it doubles the amount that they'll have at retirement, which puts them in a position to be able to do whatever they want to do in retirement, and that's what retirement should be all about, and that is doing all those things you didn't get to do while we were working.
Well, and your job becomes not just transactional. It becomes
Well,
a part of it. It's often part of people's life anyway, but at the same time, to feel that you are an employee owner versus just punching a clock, it's a totally different vibe.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you a very specific question because ESOPs, as we have learned trying to educate ourselves and educate the executive team and the company, can be confusing. So here's the question. Did you ever consider selling? Does this ESOP represent any kind of sales transaction? Is this about selling the company?
Yeah, a good question and a good way to frame it, actually. So yes, I did consider selling. Again, I'd always thought that an ESOP was the way to go, but there's a time in business when you realize you're just not big enough to be on your own, and you have to make a decision on whether you're going to build the business up by bringing in perhaps other companies, buying other companies, and so forth, or you're going to get bought by a company and become part of that same thing, a roll up, if you will. We decided a long time ago that before we decided to go out and start acquisitioning companies, we considered maybe we would have to sell. And the reason is we weren't quite big enough to have the people we needed to work as sophisticated as this industry has become. We weren't quite able to afford that. So we made the tough decision to decide to become the buyer or the acquisition company as opposed to be acquired by somebody else. And
when was that?
Well, 2015 was the first business we acquired, and that was the Houston office. 2015, December of 2015, and then in 2017, the Arkansas offices, and 2018, 2019 was when Central Texas came into the fold. And since that time, we've added some software companies and so forth to the mix.
But that idea of selling is history,
It is.
Right?
It is.
And one thing that I do know about the acquisition strategy, so you took a very intentional, very measured approach to it, right? So Lone Star had a playbook. You had a playbook, your business plan, and the famous Ray Bailey, been on the road for 5 years business plan. You were legendary back in that time. But really, it wasn't like a book report business plan for investors. It was really your guiding structure that told you the things that had to be done. And essentially, you did the same thing with the acquisitions. Tell us a little bit about the playbook.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, the playbook, the original business plan was 144 pages of information written and gathered up over the 5 years, and from a couple of books that I had read about how to put together a business plan and what to think about and so forth. What it didn't cover, though, is it didn't cover the fact that the industry was going to grow to a point where companies were going to come in and start acquisitioning businesses and become big, huge in the industry. We've got companies that are $500 million in this industry.
Big, some of them bigger.
Some of them are bigger. That's true. But there's companies that do exactly what we do that are $500 million. So when we went out to, and this was long before that, of course. But when we went out to add businesses, we decided that we were going to stay in our scope of work, which was schools and hospitals, and we were going to acquisition companies that were specifically in that business of schools and hospitals, and specifically Rauland distributors. So our playbook had a criteria on what we were looking for and what we didn't want. As a matter of fact, we had divested ourselves of fire alarm and security prior to going out and acquisitioning these companies. So when we looked for them, we tried to find companies that fit exactly what we were doing. And the other thing is we needed them to be in a growing market, and so that fell true with Houston. It was in a perfectly good growing market. Not so much with the Arkansas. You know, it's not as big a growing market. It's still a growing market, but it isn't as big as Central Texas, for instance. And again, there's where a lot of the growth of the United States is coming in throughout Texas. And so it really worked out well for us to be able to acquisition to partners that were within the state of Texas and were adjacent to our company, adjacent to this company territory-wise or physically. You know, being able to bring those into the fold and bring those companies all together and work in an environment that we were used to gave us a lot of legs. What we found ourselves doing is because all of a sudden now we're the bigger company, we now have the wherewithal to have the IT people and the informatics people and the clinical people and all that on staff. That became, now it gives us a position to be able to step off into more of a nationwide footprint as opposed to just a Texas footprint. So that has really worked out well for us.
So, 2025 milestone year for Lone Star. Your vision of the ESOP comes to fruition. So we have a bright future ahead of us. We have very engaged employees. We have an opportunity for them to participate as owners. What do you hope that Lone Star looks like in 10 years?
You know, I would hope it looks similar to what it is now, but continues to grow. You know, I would expect it will double in size in that 10-year period, if not triple. I see it being more of a nationwide presence than it has today. It will still be a Rauland distributor. It will still be we're one of the largest Rauland distributors, and I think will always be, that will be our key point. But with some of the other initiatives we have within the company, it gives us an opportunity to really, truly transform what goes on in hospitals and transform what goes on in educational facilities, schools specifically. And I would see us becoming even more of a national influence 10 years down the road, having employees maybe in throughout most of the states in the United States, and certainly a presence every place.
Cool. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Not just as the founder, but as a person. So, you know, you're heading towards a place where you'll be less involved with the business, so you can reflect a little bit. So what would you like your legacy to look like?
Well, you know, that's a good thought. I don't really reflect too much on what the legacy is. You know, it'll write itself. But I will tell you what I'm passionate about. Of course, I'm passionate about aviation. You can see that from all the pictures behind me. But what you can't see is off to one side is the Angel Flight and the public service work that I also do. And that's something that I would like to be able to do more of, and that is to be able to help be able to fly. Currently, I use it to fly. I help people get to where they need to be for their medical treatments. And you know what they found over the years is that people heal better at home. And so if you can fly somebody from their home to the medical treatment, get the medical treatment, and then get them back home to recover, they're going to be, they got a much higher chance of recovering around their friends and around their family and around their groups that they normally hang with. And so that's the kind of thing that I've done. I've done that for 20 years now, and I'd like to continue to do that and get even bigger into it. And then there's some other public service work that would be fun to do. So, and you know what, you ask about the sale. This does create a bit of a sale. It creates a little liquidity so that I can now step out of the business, put a new president in charge as we've done this year, and be able to go out and do some of those things on my own and not be associated with the business. But honestly, the best part of it is to watch the people that are still behind and watch them grow and move into position of president, vice president, CTOs, you know, whatever the case is, you know. I just love to see that growth and for them to be able to fulfill their dreams just like I was able to fulfill mine in Lone Star.
Yeah, I had a question written down, what would make you feel most proud? And I think what I'm hearing from you is that, creating this engine for um, all these people to be successful, and
Yeah.
and your ability to use that engine, from an altruistic standpoint and helping people, uh, which is going to give you a lot of satisfaction. And not everybody has that freedom
Right.
to do that. So you've created that. So I'm going to ask you in closing a Dan Rather-ish question.
Oh,
I like Dan's interviews. Um,
okay.
if you could write a letter to your younger self, the Ray who just opened Lone Star's doors, what would you say?
That's a hard one. I have. There's so many things I could say. I think probably I would like to have been more patient early on, and not that I was impatient, but I was just driven and wanted to get things done as fast as we possibly could. And I think probably slowing down, reflecting, doing a little more strategy earlier on probably would have been helpful. Although we've done well without it, but yeah, that would have been probably the strategy side of things. I would have spent more time on, I think.
And I'll ask you one last follow up related to that. What would surprise the younger Ray the most about where you are now?
Well, my fun joke is people will ask you, is this greater than your wildest dreams? And I say, well, I dream pretty big, so it's hard to get greater in my wildest dreams. But I will tell you, Lone Star has gotten bigger than I ever expected it to get, and that is past my wildest dreams. And I am so proud that we've been able to accomplish that, and I'm so proud of the team we'll leave behind to be able to run that, including you, Kenny.
And the ability for it to continually regenerate, reinvent itself, because it's under its own control. That's
It is, and
powerful.
it is, and it's in a position that it can go on forever. There's no
Yeah.
reason why it would not. It is really in a great position. A lot of opportunity out there, and a lot of great people coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, and it's big, but not too big. And and because of that, the special flavor, the culture, the energy, the vibe, that's so much more controllable or creatable in this world than if the company was a $10 billion company. We're around
Yeah.
those people a lot, and it's very different.
Yes, exactly.
Any final thoughts?
No, not really. Thank you for doing this. This is awesome. This has been fun to talk about this and reflect on where we've been over the years. And I just look forward to seeing the future Lone Star. It's going to be exciting to see
Yeah, it's happening right now. It's a beautiful
right
thing.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Very good.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks so much for joining us today on CarePoints. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe so that you can get notified when we release our next episodes. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting service, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever your favorite platform is. And make sure to visit us on the web at www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. That's www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. You'll find all of our old episodes there. Thanks so much for listening, and looking forward to having you back soon.